Hey, how are you?
Hey, I'm well. How are you?
Doing great.
Good. Thanks so much for having me on. That is
Sure.
so kind of you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, glad you're here. We're live, by the way, so
Oh, okay, awesome.
don't cuss everybody out like you were planning to. Just
I'm
joking.
glad I censored.
Okay, so yeah, I had to rush home. I'm terrible at times. I don't understand how time works, so I had to rush home and like try to get on here quick because I don't understand the difference between Eastern and Central time zones. It mystifies me. So
It all worked out. We made it happen.
all right, so thank you, welcome everybody. I know we're a little bit earlier, but if you would go ahead, and, if you would, guys, like and share the link, and we'll get more of our Chad nerd audience in here tonight. Rachel Ann Dine
Yes, you got it, Dine.
joins me from the channel Dine in Psychology. I happened upon some of her videos the other day covering cults, and I noticed that she had covered quite a few cults and gurus that I didn't know about or had overlooked. For example, Mother God. She had covered Hamilton Byrne, who I'd heard of, but I didn't know much about her. And then I noticed she also did some really in-depth analyses of some of the vegan stuff, vegan gurus, independent fundamentalist Baptist stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought Rachel would be perfect for our channel because we've done so many exposés and so many analyses of the cults with our buddy Tristan and with other guests, even PhDs. So, Rachel, tell us a little bit about you, and then we will get into your research. And I know you're a licensed therapist, but I'll let you tell us exactly what your qualifications are.
Sure. Yeah. So as you said, I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've been in the field since about 2005. Really worked in a variety of different settings from inpatient, psychiatric, long term, and residential hospitals to short term acute crisis stabilization. Worked for a short stint at a methadone medication assisted treatment facility, military and family life counseling. I currently own and operate my mental health private practice and really am passionate about just, it kind of started out with domestic violence, and which to me is a form of being a cult of one. So it's the authoritarian control that's exhibited amongst and in the interpersonal relationship. But then it kind of spread to groups, high demand groups. And that is, also a result of my own background. Haven't been involved in a cult, but definitely grew up in a religious organization and thankfully had parents who are in the sciences and medicine. So I had a little bit of both worlds and was able to kind of see when people take things too far. And just overall, really don't like seeing people taken advantage of. So that's my long winded introduction. But yeah, I'm just happy to be here.
Thank you. Making sure my mic's working here. Yeah, I mean we
Yeah.
we have covered so many different cults. I did two a little more, I guess you could say, poppy versions of Hollywood cults. So my books deal with
Mm.
that quite a bit. But I was just so glad to see you go pretty in depth on some of these other people that we really haven't touched on. So today, I think what I'd like to do is cover Hamilton Byrne, Mother
Mhm.
Goddess. I think I'd mentioned to you in the email, and then I did finally finish the full four series thing of Hulu on Teal Swan, and I
Oh,
watched
good.
I watched your Teal Swan takes. So those are great. Before we get into that, why don't we talk about from a therapy perspective? Because, like I said, on my channel, we've had a lot of academics, we've had a lot of philosophers, a lot of religious clerics on to talk about cults,
Mhm.
but I've not had anybody from the psychology therapy domain. So I'm really glad to
Yeah.
get your perspective. So, what are some of the key? I know this is kind of basic, but just for the audience, what are some of the key patterns that we see with either a guru or a cult that we ought to look for like red flags? Like, if you had like a top 10 or a top five red flags, what would you say?
Yeah, you got it. I always think about the one of the most common initial stages of recruitment, and one of the most common ways that cultic groups bring someone in is through love bombing. So it's through that outpouring of loving words and really telling the potential new member that they're just so special and they're going to make a lot of money and they've got the right personality and attitude. And of course, as you can imagine, this happens in romantic relationships too. But that love bombing across the board, it is so prevalent. And once they get those emotional claws into the potential new member, then the new member just soaks it up and feels great, but then they're devalued and they're almost left guessing, what's happening here? Did I do something? And then there is always the use of shame. Shame is a great way to stunt behavior and to keep people searching to do better and be better and feel less than. So they're on that hamster wheel of seeking enlightenment, seeking money if they're in a multi-level marketing company, which is, basically just so scamish, and so forth and so on. So love bombing without a shadow of a doubt. And any group that seems to really speak to you in a way that nobody else has. This may sound strange, but if you meet someone and you feel like that individual understands you better than anyone else, this is just such the skeptic and pragmatic side of me. I feel like that is where keep your eyes open, because people can posture nonstop and be so chameleon-esque and really try to get you where they want you to be. They can really speak to what you need at that given time. So love bombing without a shadow of a doubt. And then if the red flag for an individual is if you're going through a period of transition in your life, if you are in a state of vulnerability, which this is why I feel no one is absolutely immune to becoming a part of a high control group, because at some point or another, we will all be vulnerable. If you've just had a big loss, you've gone through a divorce, you have moved to a new city, research shows that the two most vulnerable times are when an individual is 18 years old and going off to college, and then also when you're a senior. And that's why we're also seeing all these reports of seniors being involved in online romance scams and things of that nature, which we could go into that rabbit trail. But so I would say, there are so many, but those would be really some big red flags and things just to know, just to be vigilant about.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was watching the Hulu Teal Swan episodes, and I don't remember if it was the first or the second episode, but you start to realize that the majority of her audience are people who are clearly having issues. They're broken. They're dealing with serious, and so she sort of is feeding on that. It appeared to me.
Yes.
And it seems that people who might have other types of addictions that they're dealing with, that she's preying on. I remember that one guy in the basketball jerseys, like, I'm just here to have sex with you. Is that okay?
Yes.
And she's like, get him out of here. Right? So it's like these weird sort of traumatized people, which is what you were getting at, who are really susceptible to this. And so
very much, yeah.
Let's maybe look at some of these key examples. As we said, on my channel, we've not yet covered Ann Hamilton Byrne's cult. And a lot of people don't know that Julian Assange, for example, was raised in the Ann Hamilton Byrne cult. So we've done a lot of videos talking about Assange and his works over the years on my channel, and some of the stuff that he leaked. But what is the deal with this woman? I was really enthralled by the story that you were telling about her. I'd not really heard much about this. She's a case study in this very thing, the narcissistic sort. Oh, before we get to Ann Hamilton Byrne, I want to ask you this. There's like a zillion videos now online on YouTube where everybody's talking about narcissistic psychopaths, sociopaths. Like everybody, it's like,
yes.
And then everybody says, they're gaslighting me. There's like a million videos of vegans. If you disagree with a vegan, they'll immediately say, you're gaslighting me. And they're all vegans from like the UK. You're gaslighting me. They're gaslighting. So disagreeing with somebody is not gaslighting, right?
Correct.
So can you give us what exactly is gaslighting?
Yes, I agree. I feel that the terms narcissism and gaslighting are almost overused.
Yeah.
And if not careful, it can water down how intense these disorders and characteristics of this disorder can really be. So I agree with you. Gaslighting is basically when one individual, typically who has traits of narcissistic personality disorder, try to spin the story or make their victim confused, to try to insert doubt in the victim of the victim's reality of the situation. And, you know, interestingly enough, it originated in the 1940s when there was a movie made about an individual, a gentleman. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, in
Gaslight?
fact, I did a whole, actually a public lecture on that movie. So
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
it's a classic here. But I wanted to get a therapist definition and not my movie definition of it.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. So, yeah, no, I would just say it's basically when somebody tries to question you or put something back on you that reconstructs your reality of the situation. And
Now,
so, yeah,
okay, so
go ahead.
now let's say with a narcissist, this is something beyond just a really selfish person, right? I mean, this is like a level of a grade above that, right?
Very much so. Yeah, it's definitely the key distinction in any disorder is if it starts to impair your functioning of daily living. So, if somebody has a touch of ego, which I'm sure we'll get into, most of these spiritual self proclaimed gurus talk about how ego is just horrific. And if you go against the group, it's your ego and let it go. That's not a bad thing. You know, to have a sense of ego, to have a sense of self is vital in this world that we live
Right.
in. But narcissism takes it so much further in that the person has such a fragile sense of self esteem that they try to exploit other people for their own personal gain. One of my favorite aspects of narcissism, though, is that most people come across as so charming and they are often very successful because they're well spoken and they're so manipulative. But at the root of it, it's such high exploitation of other people. Other people are a means to an end. People are discarded once the narcissist is done with them, and it is just an inflated sense of self.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed is that it seems like the slightest criticism, even if it's constructive criticism, is seen to be an attack, and there's like this lashing out. There was one part in the Hulu series when everybody's gathered around and they're grilling the girl from Germany, and Teal Swan is like,
Mhm.
I feel like you're just not in alignment with me. I feel like that you feel like you should disagree with me when I feel like you should be in alignment with me. And how dare you? Because I'm the smartest person in the world, right? So
That's
it's
right.
like the
Yeah.
slightest, and then I mean the German girl didn't really even do anything mean
No.
or it was just really bizarre. And then she was like telling everybody else to gang up. I feel like everybody needs to criticize you right now and tell you why you're wrong, right?
Yeah.
So that's something I've noticed is like an inability to admit even the slightest amount of error,
Yeah,
right?
it's so built upon an image that the narcissist has for themselves. That's why I think we see so many pastors fall from grace because
Right.
they're behind that pulpit just preaching away, you know, this is how you live your life. But it's such a high standard of self that can almost be unrealistic, and ignoring of their own emotions. But yeah, that was
Yeah.
a great example that you brought up with Teal Swan. And I just remember there was another part in that documentary where there was a gentleman who questioned her and said, well, who do you look up
Oh yeah, I
to?
remember that guy. Yeah.
And just her response was bizarre. You know, I mean, she said, what kind of question is that? Why would you even ask me? That such an appropriate
Yeah,
question
that
to
was that.
ask
I
of
forgot that
anyone.
guy. Yeah, he was like the kind of chubby bald guy, and he was like, I kind of just wonder, like, who do you look up to? She's like, why would I look up to anybody? Like, who is there better than me? I mean, like, there isn't anybody. And
Yeah.
if I was to tell you there was somebody more spiritual than me, I would be lying because there isn't. And everybody's
Well,
just
and yeah.
like,
And then some example about, well, if the fastest runner in the world doesn't have a mentor because they're the fastest runner in the
right.
world. And it's like, well, how the hell did the runner get there? I mean, come on. So yeah.
Well, this was another
Yeah.
trait you mentioned in your videos that
Hmm.
I had not heard of, which I thought was a good. Now, in the religious sphere that I come from, we sometimes call it delusion, but I think you use the term like a narcissistic spiritual claim, where they claim something really outlandish, like they claim, um, I've discovered all of reality, or like make a claim that's doesn't match up with even what's in their life, right? Like somebody 25 years old and they've discovered the secrets of the universe. I mean, that's just really highly unlikely, right? I mean, I don't remember
Yes.
the term you used. It was something like that.
You said it, just spiritual
That's
narcissism,
it. That's it. Yeah.
basically. Yep. Yeah, I think I hear a common one with particular emphasis in the, religious spectrum is when people claim to have a direct line of communication
Right.
with God or their higher power. To me, that's an immediate red flag. It's hard because in my opinion, obviously faith is really believing in something that we can't necessarily see, feel, touch. There's no scientific evidence to back it up. And that is just something that can easily be so exploited by a destructive or cultic leader. So, but yeah, spiritual narcissism
Right.
is real.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about that just because, I mean, I had a religious journey myself. I wouldn't
Mhm.
say I was in a cult, but I was in a cult-ish kind of
Oh, okay.
fundamentalist group when I was young. And
Mm, mm.
even though that guy wasn't a guru, he was more on the sort of the fundamentalist Christian side. He did have a lot of the traits of these characters. So it kind of transgresses the borders of different religions. I mean, it could really be any religious group has this kind of a character in it who
Mhm.
is in delusion, that thinks that basically that they have the answer to everything. And if you dare to disagree even in the slightest point, you're then subject to, they see that as a challenge to them when it may not even be. It may just be a sincere question about the religion. But why do you think is it because of of religion kind of being in the domain of the mystical? Is that why it attracts these kinds of just psycho people to try to set up cults? Is that why you think?
I think that definitely has something to do with it. And I also think that religiosity is a great grounds for the imbalance of power to take place, in that you've got someone who is looking for peace, they are looking for comfort, well being, and the person in leadership can easily capitalize on that. But it is still something I'm interested in studying, how individuals like Warren Jeffs of FDLS, how he took it to such a dark level. And I think it just speaks to, if there are no checks and balances for a nefarious leader, they can run with it and just
Yeah.
run amok, doing whatever they want to. But yeah, I definitely think that the ability to exploit a person's emotions in that religious capacity is so present.
Right. So it's like putting the lion in the gazelle section of the zoo, right? Like just let him loose, right?
Hmm.
Because there's so many people who are in the religious domain seeking answers. And a lot of times people are attracted to religion because they're in that state of trauma, vulnerability that you were
Yes.
talking about. So that's becomes a just prey, predatory prey relationship in that domain. Let's get into,
Mhm.
by the way, guys in the audience, if you would, please hit like and share. And also, I've got Rachel's channel linked in the show description. You can head on over to her channel if you want to see more of her videos. I've been watching quite a few of those over the last couple weeks. A lot of really good, insightful information there on a lot of the cults that we've never touched on here. So definitely check out her videos. Maybe let's get into Ann Hamilton Byrne. Your videos on that were great. Could you tell? I think you had a
Thank you.
part one and a part two. On
Hmm.
the part two was Mother Goddess or what? Mother God.
Hmm.
Tell us
Yep.
about Ann Hamilton Byrne and what is the deal with this crazy woman?
Oh my gosh, she was, I would definitely consider, of course, hard to make formal diagnostic claims. That's not what I'm doing here, but I definitely saw a lot of narcissistic psychopathy, sociopathy, which, so I'll get to that. But basically, Anne Hamilton Byrne, cultic leader, came to power, came to her big peak in the 1960s, which I may add, was the perfect time for cults to start developing, because there were so many transitions societally, racially, with social justice, everything. And so she actually hopped on the new age spirituality train. She became really close with someone high up in a college. At this point, that name is escaping me. I'm sure one of your viewers know that. But it was in Australia, and he was the head professor over there, Raynor Johnson. And Rainer was her ticket, her gateway for her to form parasitic relationships with other people in positions of power, psychologists, social workers, doctors. And she took it a step further and formed these networks at this psychiatric facility called New Haven, where individuals were being treated with LSD for psychiatric symptoms. And she would have these individuals take LSD, then present herself in white and trick them into thinking that she was basically the next coming of God or the spiritual angel being. And, probably the saddest piece of this is not only all of the adults that fell prey to her, but there were so many kids. She illegally adopted, I think at one point it was 27 children, so many kids, and would remove children from their biological parents who were also cult members, and have the kids raised in these horrific conditions where food deprivation was present, sleep deprivation, true abuse. And even at some point, it turned into, drugging the kids.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's her in a nutshell. She had quite the background, though, Jay, really just a mother with very severe mental health issues, schizophrenia. Her mother reportedly passed away in a psychiatric hospital. So yeah, she was quite the narcissist, and I would venture to say had antisocial personality disorder, which is the modern psychopathy and sociopathy.
Well, two things you mentioned there that I know quite a bit about. One is that
Mhm.
she was giving people LSD. Did you come across anything in your research that might have connected her to programs like MK Ultra? I mean, I know that you don't get into the conspiracy genre, but I read probably 10 books on MK Ultra, so I know a good bit about it. And I'm just curious
Mm.
if you noticed anything connected to, because dosing kids in a cult setting with LSD, I mean, to me that just screams MK Ultra. And actually, quite a bit of that research was done not just in U.S. universities, but actually in universities all over the world, especially in Australia. So, did you come across anything related to that?
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I didn't, but I may have not looked deeply enough from what you're saying, and the fact that a lot of that took place in Australia, which is where her cult was, and she had these connections with, people that were in the higher echelon, if
Yeah,
you
you
will.
mentioned somebody. Yeah, there was like a British elitist sort of guy. I don't remember who it was. Elite British rich guy.
Professor,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, Rainer Johnson.
Okay. I can't remember his name, but
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not heard of that. I'm not familiar with that name, but yeah, actually, many of the universities in Australia participated in kind of like an extended campus of the U.S. version of the MK Ultra programs. But yeah, there's a
Wow.
obscure book on that. A lot of people don't know about it, but
Hmm.
yeah, that just screams to me MK Ultra, even though I don't know for sure. And by the way, when I was talking about for the people in the audience, I wasn't dissing Julian Assange. Actually, I like Julian Assange, so I just thought it was odd that he spent a time in that cult, and it seemed to be quite a few like little blonde-headed kids. That just because it was Australian indigenous white people there, I guess you could say, like they tend to be sort of blonde, blue-eyed people. Or do we think that there was some reason why she was adopting kids like that?
I did read that she wanted to recreate a master race and
Oh wow.
actually dyed the dyed their hair blonde.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
So, yep, blonde and red. But yeah, it was her dream to, create this master race of superior children who were the smartest and who would take over.
Well,
Yeah.
so the other thing that in your video that came up that maybe you want to ask questions was a lot of times these cult leaders just seem to have like 20 $50 million. Like, where did this woman
Mm.
get this money?
Yeah, that I had read that she would require all of her members who, again, had very, upper level occupations to donate. It was some either 10% or some percentage of their salaries to her for the
That
cause,
makes
for the
sense.
mission.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't
Which,
so and
yeah.
that tends to be a pattern too, where it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
we love you. By the way, give us your inheritance, right? Like,
You got it.
okay,
You,
uh,
or show your devotion
right.
by giving money. Mm-hmm.
Gwen Shamblin, I think, didn't she like her cult was set up to where everybody involved in the church, like you could only shop with other people in the cult, right? Didn't she have some setup like that?
Yeah, when it was all said and done, and in fact, I still peruse her website. She has an entire setup where they have physicians, dentists,
Yes.
hairstylists. I mean, anybody, auto mechanic shop. And so it's all kept within the church, which, of course, only increases that authoritarian control. And the lack of independence for people to be able to get out if their finances are tied up.
Oh, exactly. Yeah,
Mm.
that's a no-brainer, right? I was trying to think why would they be doing that other than just for money, but then it's like, well, now you can't. Like, where else you gonna get your hair did if you leave the
That's
cult,
right.
right?
That's right.
Um,
Hmm.
so let's see. Let's move on to our next guru, Mother Goddess. I had not even heard of this one either until the other day. I saw a TikTok video about her, and I was like, "How have I never heard about this cult?" And then I saw that you had done a video on this, and the
Hmm.
TikTok video was saying that they dressed her up like a Christmas tree when she died. I was like, "What?" So
Yes.
tell us about Mother
Yes.
Goddess. Who is this woman, and what's her story? Or is it
So
Mother
her
God? It's
name,
Mother God, right?
Mother God.
Mother God.
Yep. Yep. Her name she is now deceased. Was Amy Carlson. And several years ago, I believe it was 10 years or so, she ended up just deciding to leave her family after meeting a man on the internet. And together they formed this spiritual group that started out, rather benign, just like any other spiritual individual you may see making YouTube videos. But it rapidly declined and progressed into her engaging in heavy substance use, high alcoholism. I think there was talk of drug abuse. And she had a series of men who would come in and be the father God counterpart to her mother God. She also demonstrated all those facets of Stephen Hassan's bite model,
Could you tell us about that?
intense
I know
behavior.
that's in your videos a lot, but could you do a little breakdown
Mhm.
of that, or I know you don't. You might not have it pulled up, but could you tell us what that is?
Yeah, definitely. So, Bite Model was created by a gentleman named Stephen Hassan. He was formerly a cult member of the Moonies and was able to extract himself. And I'd say he's one of the leading people. If anybody wants to check out his website, it's freedomofmind.com. It's great, lots of resources. But his Bite Model deals with it's a great assessment tool if you ever feel that you're in a high control group. B stands for behavioral control. I is informational control. T is thought control, and E is emotional control. Behavioral control is, strict constraints on behavior, waking up at certain times, only being permitted to use the restroom at certain times. I mean, it can become very, very detailed. Informational control is he has so many great criterion listed, but in a nutshell is basically limiting the information that the cultic member is able to receive. Thought control deals with thought suppression, and to think certain thoughts are evil, to go against the group is evil. At all costs you are to suppress them. And emotional control is much of the same. So, really attempting to control emotions.
Excellent. So, now in the case of
Mhm.
Mother God, when I first
Yes.
saw your video and I'm watching your take on her, the immediate impression you get is like, well, this is just like the average yoga girl on Instagram. How does she
Right.
go from yoga girl on Instagram to like crazy cult leader?
Yeah. I think it was a combination of she really, really had a horrific substance abuse issue. I mean, just kind of, well, I mean, I say speculating here, but I mean, it was quite obvious. If you watch the videos, you can see her,
Yeah, you can tell
drinking
she's on
heavily.
something. Yeah.
You got it. You got it. And then it also came out that she had some kind of eating disorder. So, really engaged in restrictive eating. And I think that, with that combination, when you're high on something, when you're not consuming enough calories, obviously your brain is not even functioning as
Was
well as it
she into
should.
vegan stuff?
I don't think so, because there was a video where she became very irate at a cultic member because he brought her meatballs instead
Oh,
of, yeah, something else. So yeah, no, I don't think she was vegan. But yeah, when it all came down to it, she was found deceased in a cult member's home. They had enshrined her body. This just happened in
yeah,
2019, I
right,
believe.
right.
And yeah, Christmas lights, glitter around the eye sockets, pretty decomposed, not to get too gory. But yeah, it was, oh, and she had colloidal silver in her system, which they, were saying warded off the coronavirus and touting that as
Right.
a treatment.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, did she?
Mhm.
What was the belief that she was telling people? Like, what was the? Was it an all over the place thing, or did they have like a systematic religious dogma?
I'm going to be honest, Jay, it was kind of difficult for me to fully
So it was all over the
follow.
place. Crazy. Okay.
It was all over the place. It seemed to me more so shrouded in her maintaining control and using spiritual mumbo jumbo, for a lack of a better word, to swindle people into believing her. Oh,
Right.
she did do esoteric brain surgeries and things of that nature. Yeah, where she would meet with people via Zoom and heal them. Yep. And they still do it. They still do it today. Her cult lives on.
I saw Teal claims that she can do that too. Like she said something like she's like I forget what she calls it. She's like I can heal you on the astral plane. I can go inside your brain right now and heal you.
Yes.
Yeah, some which is odd, but okay. So when you were talking about the restriction of activities, diet,
Mm.
I'm sure you probably saw it. Do you remember that Scientology documentary from 4 years ago or so? Remember that? It was
Yeah,
really
was it with
good.
the
I can't remember
Leah
the name of it.
Remini
That's
or?
well, there was it may be that one, but it's like it's a full like hour and a half, 2 hour documentary, and they go all the way into like Tom Cruise and the other
Mm,
guy, and then they talked about how on the compounds, they had all these. The public image was that it was all this, healthy stuff, but then like you're living in a bunk and
mm,
you're like having to work like 70 hours a week, and it was like this really wild. They didn't hardly feed. Do
yes.
you remember? You know, what I'm talking. I can't remember the name of that documentary, but
Yes, I do. I can't remember the name either, but I remember being shocked watching it. Yeah.
it's the same type of thing where it's like, well, part of controlling a person would be to not allow them to get, the diet that they need, like a restrictive diet. And
Yes.
that's one thing that we've covered with Tristan is a lot of vegan cults because the vegan gurus will do the same thing
Mm.
where their followers are basically emaciated and they're nutrient deficient, and so they can't even think straight because they're not even getting like basic nutrients.
You got it. It's such a quick technique. I mean, if you go to someone's 5-day retreat, like a Tony Robbins or a Teal Swan, they keep those, from what I've heard, they keep those functions going until sometimes 2 in the morning. And they're not feeding the people. You're just expected to sit there and take in, what your leader is saying. And I mean, being there at 8 a.m. to the wee hours of the morning, you can't think straight. You can't make good decisions. There's all kinds of tactics. Those retreats always get me too, because people will, they'll make you jump up and dance around and get that energy, that blood flow. They'll play that loud music to pump you up. And it's just a pseudo pump up effect. But yeah, the whole food deprivation, to me, that is such a quick technique that so many people engage in.
I remember I was invited to speak at an event in Topanga Canyon a couple years ago out in California, and so I was giving this talk about social engineering and cults, and it was funny because right after I finished, I'm not trying to knock the venue because I appreciate everybody having me out there, but it was so weird because my talk was like the polar opposite of the people that came after me. The guy that comes after me is like this 18-year-old guy, and he gets up there and he's like, "Yeah, so like, I just want to tell everybody that I'm
Oh
only
no.
I'm only 18 and I have only lived on sunshine since I was 14. So it was like,
Oh,
have you heard of these
no.
people that claim that you can live on breatharians, and the people that claim you can live only on
Oh,
sunshine? And I'm like, dude, you're 18 and you're saying that you haven't eaten in 4 years. It's like, I don't
oh,
know. But
right.
we tend to see
Mm.
these just wild, outrageous claims. I mean, that's like a red flag number one, right? Is like, you can't live on air. You can't live on just the sun, right?
Yes. And also the claims of, I'm half alien or I'm clairvoyant, but they're, it's just you're expected to just fall in line and believe it. And that is my pragmatic brain's worst nightmare, when I hear people talk about things like that, because where's the proof?
Yeah, well, that's so I've never really followed Teal Swan. I've seen her videos pop up over the years.
Hmm.
I had a season of a TV show at Gaia, and my
Oh,
TV,
really?
but my show was on movies, so it had nothing to do with like spirituality and this kind of stuff. So we
Okay.
were just
Hmm.
deconstructing films, and I remember hearing about her when I had that show, but I still never paid any attention to her stuff. So, with this new Hulu show, I think a lot of people are talking more about. There's tons of videos being made about Teal Swan, and um,
Hmm.
so I don't really know what she talked about. I thought she was just like the typical, meditation, yoga, Instagram type of girl. And then it
Hmm.
turns out, so I was listening to a bunch of videos, including yours, and watching that show. Did you know that she claims? I don't know if she still claims this because she seems to claim a lot of things, but that she works with the Arcturian aliens. Did you know that one?
I believe I have heard
Okay,
that.
yeah.
Yes. And there was something about, I can't remember the word. You probably will know it. It's where you know and have access to every recorded thought that's ever been thought
Oh, like the
or
Akashic records.
yes, yes, that's it. Yeah.
Right. So
Uh,
people who do like hardcore DMT stuff, they get really into hallucinogens. People that have had really extreme DMT trips will claim, "Oh, like bro, I went to the Akashic records dimension in my trip and I could read everybody's thoughts." And then
mm,
they'll come back from their trip thinking, "Oh, well, see, that's how I got that power because I had the drug trip and it told me this." And I'm guessing that in Teal Swan's case, that she probably had a period, or I don't know what, I don't remember if she did hallucinogens. Probably, she probably had some experience like that, and that's what gave her the impression that she could do these things or whatever. Is that? Do you know if that's the case?
the main I've never heard that particular claim, although I'm not going to say it's out of the realm of possibility. I just know that she has stated that she was the victim of satanic ritual abuse repeatedly and been very detailed in these instances. She is really big into pulling memories from people and implantation of false memories into people. She has a process called the completion process where she basically, it's really risky. I mean, it's not even a practice that therapists are taught to do in terms of implanting memories into people. It's we're taught to be extremely careful. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm on the fence, I feel like something may have happened to me, I have these bits and pieces of memories, then the therapist must remain very just neutral in that situation. But Teal is very quick to say, "Oh, your parent, abused you in this manner, and this is what happened. They don't love you, and this is why." So, yeah. So she claimed, though, to answer your original question, the satanic ritual abuse, which I know you have talked about before on your channel,
Yeah.
if I'm not
So
mistaken.
I've read many of Dr. Colin Ross's books, and he's kind of the psychology therapy guy out there who talks about MPD, DID, and to what
Mm-hmm.
degree this is and is not real. And so what he says actually is what you just said, which is that as a therapist, his job is not to confirm or deny the claims, but to treat a person
Right.
who believes that they have undergone this.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Especially it was really, really drilled into my head when working with kids, because kids are so impressionable that if you lead them in a particular direction, they will start to believe that they were the recipient of harmful behavior. And same with adults. If you're an adult experiencing a major depressive episode and your lens of the world is really dark, and your therapist tries to tell you, or your spiritual guru tells you, yeah, well, your family doesn't love you. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's something that we've seen in a lot of gurus and cult leaders. They always want to break you away from any other source of check on their power. So family
Mhm.
members, right? You got to break them away from that. The easiest way to do that is to get the person to think, oh, the source of all the problems in my life is my family. Now, there might be problems with your family, but that's not, the guru isn't telling you that because he wants to help you. He's telling you that
Yes.
because he's manipulating you.
You got it. That division will only aid in that self-proclaimed guru success and being able to get you to join their group. Definitely. Yeah. If you can, and that's why I always really view this as it's a cult of one on a large scale. It's an abusive relationship on a large scale, because that's exactly what a one-on-one abusive relationship does, is that the individual engaging in harm against their partner, first thing they try to do is isolate their partner. You're much more easily able to be controlled, manipulated, quote unquote brainwashed, or your personality broken down and then rebuilt into who the person wants you to be, if you don't have that support. And cultic leaders, they're just notorious for it, as I'm sure you've noticed too.
Yeah. I would like your take as a professional in that domain. My view is that there are definitely people who exaggerate, make up stories of abuse. There can be implanted memories, but I
Hmm.
also think that there are cases of real SRA. There are cults that do engage in this kind of abuse. So I think that the truth ultimately kind of falls somewhere in the middle between made up and exaggerated stories. I think a lot of damaged people who, in the case of say Teal Swan, I did as much research as I could into her past and her claims about
Hmm.
this kind of stuff. There may have been something that happened to her, but that doesn't mean that the totality of her story is correct. And the reason that I wouldn't accept the totality of her story is because there's so many other things that she says that don't line up, that don't make sense. And so what the problem is that calls into question then her origin tale, right? Of the
Right.
outlandish stories of being sewn up inside of a corpse and this kind of stuff. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
so my question is this: is it possible? And again, I don't know. We don't know the case of her case, but according to what she publicly claims, is it possible that a person who does have an event of abuse or something like that, then later goes crazy with it in terms of the story or the recounting of it? Does that make sense? What I'm saying, like maybe there was something that happened, but it wasn't what she says. Does that make sense? Is that?
Hmm. So maybe exaggerates it or
Yeah, yeah,
exacerbates
yeah. Like,
an
yeah,
element of it.
right.
I do not think that that's out of the realm of possibility. What I can speak to is that the research shows time and time again that when somebody incurs an act of abuse or harm towards them, research indicates that often, and if it was repeated, then it's not, it's almost never becomes repressed. The brain does not repress it. Instead, the person remembers it. And so this was taken from people who were in concentration camps. This was also a series of individuals who were survivors of childhood assault. They were also interviewed, and everyone remembered elements. So the concept of repressed memories is very controversial. you know, Generally speaking here, I think that if somebody has an agenda and there has been an act of they believe that something negative has happened to them, and if it fits their agenda, the message that they're trying to sell, I mean, it just becomes propaganda.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
to speak to your original question, does that kind of
Yeah.
answer what you?
Well, so like in her case, it looks like um, she's got this sort of weird baptism that she does where she like holds them in the water, and then
Yes.
is this part of that completion process where she's basically saying, I'm, tapping into the traumas of when you were young, and we're going to heal you right now, and is that where you think that she might do the implantation of is that what's going on there?
I think the implantation of false memories more so occurs when she meets with people one on one, or this is just my opinion, or in like a group type setting at her retreats, or calls someone up on stage at an assembly, which to me is such a power move because you're telling someone who's sitting right in front of you something really negative happened to them, or posturing to know them very deeply. All those hundreds of people in the audience bear witness to that. And then what do they do with that information? I always just wonder, do they leave the event wondering, oh, well, maybe my family did this to me? If that person could have had it happen, you see, it's like a ripple effect, in my opinion. And I think that's where the implantation of
Well,
false memories could happen.
what is her weird baptism thing? I never understood what she's doing with that. What is that? Do you know?
I believe that it's called water breathing or something of that nature. And from my understanding, to me, I thought it was more so similar to this process called the rebirthing process, which a lot of
Oh,
it's an
New Agers do
unregulated.
that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what crossed my mind. But in some way, it's supposed to help you, I don't know, become anew again or feel refreshed. I'm not very schooled in that particular technique, if I'm being honest, but that's what I thought it
Okay.
was.
Um,
Mhm.
so now if we get into your take on her and the Hulu series. By the way, audience, I want to remind you guys, if you would hit like and share, also turn on the notifications if you want to get notified for when I go live. Be sure and have that clicked. We don't always keep it to a steady schedule. We kind of do live streams at random, at least every other day or two. So be in the loop for that. If you want to do super chats, that's via Streamlabs. So the Streamlabs link is there in the chat. I'll put it in there again, or mods, if you would go ahead and keep adding that Streamlabs link for the super chats, and then you can ask Rachel a question or myself when we'll take super chats here in a moment. So let's get into Teal. Where do you want to start with her? Do you want to go back to like her? So we kind of mentioned her claims early on of the ritual abuse, which are kind of immediately thrown into question, given the fact that she has all these sort of outlandish claims. And then it looks like I found there was a girl on TikTok that my wife had sent me her whole series, and she actually went really deep into all of Teal Swan's background, talking about the claims of being an international model, the claims of being a Olympic skiing contestant. So basically, what we start to realize is really outlandish delusions of grandeur, basically.
Yes.
Okay, so had you heard of all those things about?
I did.
Okay.
I did. And to me, it just speaks to the posturing, the almost narcissistic posturing that someone does to gain that sense of authority, approval, validation from others, to be seen as special, different from anyone else. But yeah, I had heard the range of claims of that nature.
Yeah, she claimed
Like,
to have been. She was in Playboy. She had, and it was all within like the span of like a few years, and obviously not true, right? And then it turned into Wiccan goddess of sex. It turned into working with Arcturian aliens, living with Hugh Hefner. She's a reincarnated Cleopatra. I mean, it's just obviously it's bizarre to me that a person wouldn't see these as red flags. I mean, these are just such outlandish claims. But it looks like they went from that to then she decided. This is my guess, because if you notice in the documentary, her dog is named Osho, right?
oh, okay, that's right.
And
Yes.
if you remember, Osho was a completely concocted cult that is really bizarre. It has everything from drug running, arms trafficking, I mean, mind control, drugging the water. It was a large surveillance setup where they were filming the ORGIES, which I think.
I believe he was exploiting women
Yeah,
too.
yeah, oh yeah, all of that is
Yeah.
in the. You probably saw the Wild Wild Country. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we covered Osho back in the day when that came out. And so I see some patterns here that maybe she was modeling what she wanted to do after Osho. And then in the documentary, they're asking her, what are you trying to do? What's your goal? She's like, I want to be bigger than Pope. My goal is to top the Pope. I want to be,
Yes.
she wants to be the Pope. She wants to be the guru of the world. And then you see this scene where they're discussing their marketing techniques. And she's like, okay, Tony Robbins is at 2 million. We're at 1 million. What do we got to do to get to 2 million followers?
That's right.
And so it's basically just a marketing technique to be the guru, which to me says, well, she's just modeling herself on Deepak Chopra, Tony Robbins, and Osho.
Yep. Exactly. It becomes more so of a business.
Yes.
Versus you have to wonder how much is the intent to truly help people there. Although, I always make the disclaimer, to each their own. If watching a YouTube video brings a person a quick moment of peace, or they are able to glean one snippet of clarity, okay, that's fine. But it's the slow trickle effect that's always worrisome to me with characters like her. She does have these videos that people swear by and they think that they are really helpful. I've watched a couple. I tend to have a different opinion on some of the things that she talks about. Some of her examples that she uses to try to teach can be just incorrect, and it's a great way to start planting these seeds of doubt in people. That's going.
What do you think is the most she has this controversial idea about she talks about things unalive and people getting unalived, which is an odd way of speaking, but I think she's talking about the idea that, well, death is an illusion. You can kind of become unalived if you choose to. And so I think that's probably the most dangerous aspect most people point to. What's your take on that?
Yeah, she really is all about this reset button, that, not to fear the end of your time, so to speak, and that it's a beautiful experience. And that is so harmful and dangerous to someone who is hurting, and you're making a video and putting it out to whoever happens upon it, and someone may be in a really dark place and hear this messaging that, oh, it's just a reset, you come back, you're reincarnated into this great being. She's come under fire, and this is probably the most controversial part, is there have been several of her followers and their family members who have kind of blamed her for propelling their family member into their own loss of themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's dangerous.
So I'm assuming you saw all 4 parts of that Hulu thing, right? Okay.
I did.
So let's get into that. Let's get into that, because that was kind of an odd thing on its own, because when I started it, I didn't know, was this a promotional thing? Were they going to promote her, or was it a hit piece? So by the 4th episode, it's only a 4-part series for those that haven't seen it, but there's not really any spoilers. But I didn't come away from it thinking that they portrayed her in a good light. I mean, she seemed to be kind of like, they portrayed her as a cult leader, which surprised me, because I kind of thought it was going to be like a promotional thing. But what's your overall take on the 4-part series and the way they portrayed her?
I loved it personally for multiple reasons. I thought it was unbelievable that we got such a behind the scenes look at this guru and saw these really clandestine private interactions that she has with her inner circle. I thought it was particularly disturbing, the inner circle rules. And I don't know if you remember that meeting where the women are kind of talking and saying, oh, well, we don't want kids, and Teal,
I feel like you really don't need to have kids. I can't wake up in the morning and deal with a bunch of kids around here screaming. I mean, I have to get my beauty sleep, and for any of you to get, I just don't want that right now. So yeah, she's like trying to get and it's weird, because it's like, well, why do you care if your followers have kids? And your reasoning that they can't have kids is because
they wouldn't have their time and focus and attention on you. I mean, that just seems
Yeah.
wacky, dude. That seems crazy.
I agree. I agree. And, there was just so many times that statements were made. If you want to be part of this circle or part of this group, you got to get ready to not live an ordinary life. And this is the most important work that you're ever going to do. To me, that is such a form of manipulation, because another red flag of cults is that they prey on a person's desire for purpose. So many people in this world want to be a part of something that feels
So she said, I want to be bigger than the Pope. I want to be bigger than the Dalai Lama. And the problem with that is, again, that shows us the intention here is really to just become, it's all about her. I mean, that was the most obvious thing in this whole thing, was that it's all about serving her, and anything or anyone that doesn't completely serve her is not worthy of the group, or especially not the inner circle. I mean,
that's right.
It was odd to me too that when the German girl that was coming to date her ex, one of the first things that she did was kind of like warn her and sort of scare her into the group, and then got her into the channeling sessions, and then pretty quickly, it turned into, I feel like we're gonna have a problem. I feel like you're not in alignment with me. So it was like, it was almost like it was a breaking down, building back up. That's what a lot of the cult leaders do, is break down your identity. You have to take on a new identity, agree to the most extreme, things if you want to work in this inner circle,
Yes.
and go through this process of channeling, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Which is just unbelievably harmful and risky. And essentially, you're just having these random people as placeholders for family members, or whomever. And they're in a circle, acting out scenes from your childhood when they've never even met you. And just the most shocking part was when one of the individuals who, I can only imagine maybe had good intentions, but they're channeling this woman's family, and they say that they had a feeling that there was some foul play, for lack of a better word, from the mother to the son. And here, this woman who hears this information becomes so upset, thinking, wow, do I have this trauma history that I didn't know about? And that, to me, is that false implanting of memories.
Another thing I think that I noticed that she does that's different, that might be kind of why people listen to her, is that she tends to have this edge about her, in that she will be very upfront and direct. Now, a lot of gurus, they speak in gibberish, and they speak in like contradictions. And I don't know if you've ever seen that comedy movie with Ben Stiller and Pee-wee. It's called Mystery Men. Have you ever seen that?
I can't remember.
It's a 90s comedy, so. and one of the funny character, it's not that funny, but there's a funny character called the Sphinx, and he's kind of he's a play on the gurus. And the whole joke throughout the movie is that the Sphinx never says anything with any substance. It's always just like to be the best man, you must man up to be the best. It's just all this gibberish that doesn't mean anything. And I noticed that with her, we see her spilling a lot of gibberish, but then like she will be very direct and be like, maybe it's because you're not attractive. Maybe it's because you look like shit.
Exactly.
She'll just be very upfront. I think that's her edge. That's why people are drawn to her, because she's not the like if you listen to Osho, he's just very like this, and he'll trail off and like try to he'll put you to sleep with his booger whistle in his nose. Right. Osho will put you to sleep, but Teal Swan's like in your face, so she's got an edge. But really, she's not actually saying anything. Is that the case? Do you think that she's just, what is it that she's saying that attracts people?
In terms of what she's saying to me, I always question, where are the facts to back it up? That's a skill I even teach clients. If you're having a negative thought of self, look for the facts, concrete evidence to either validate or invalidate that negative thought of self. And for Teal, she just says whatever she wants to, and it's in that very authoritative voice. And to me, it's very reminiscent of neuro-linguistic programming.
That's what I was going to ask you. Yeah. Do you think she is using that, or maybe?
I totally do.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe inadvertently, maybe she doesn't even realize that she's using it. But yeah, I mean, the way that she postures and presents herself in that very clear, assertive tone, holding people's gazes for that long period of time. There's a lot of psychology behind the eye gaze, of asserting dominance. And
I mean, you always see a cult leader or like like Crowley. He's always doing these really, like look into my eyes, this kind of a thing. They're always doing that. Like Svengali, he does that. Have you ever seen the Svengali? Yeah. Is that? I mean, I didn't actually know there's a psychology behind that. Is that? Wow, interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
What is is the idea that because Teal is reasonably attractive as a person, that like she can just hold your gaze and kind of like talk you into it just because you're looking at her? Or I mean, what is the psychology of the gaze?
Well, the eyes hold a lot of power if you think about it. I mean, culturally, individually, in society, if you think of, even, this may sound like a random example, but the look that a mother gives her kid when the kid's acting up, stop it. And they stop. And I think Teal uses it as a sense of power to just keep people in line, to keep people in place. And I mean, if you're ever talking to someone and they're consistently holding your gaze nonstop, exactly, it almost
kind of
makes
weird.
you start
Weirds you out. Yeah, that's a good point.
It becomes uncomfortable.
Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I remember reading Bram Stoker put this in his novel about it's called The Lair of the White Worm. It's one of his other stories. It's not as famous as Dracula, but the figure in that, who's like a cult leader guy, his whole thing is that he holds your power by this gaze, and that's his power. So I wonder if Bram Stoker wasn't sort of keying into that idea of the mystical gaze, from a long time ago. But because on my channel, we oftentimes bring in literary figures and stuff like that. So let's see. I don't want to keep you too long, but a couple other figures that I found fascinating that you might not have heard of. Had you ever heard of the Source family cult and Father Yod?
No.
Oh, you should look into that one. That's a wild one.
Okay. I'll make a note. The Source family?
Yeah, there's a really good documentary on the Source family cult out in California. They're kind of like a lesser known California, hippie era cult.
Okay.
And what's weird about that one is that it has a similar progression to a lot of the really dangerous cults, where it starts out as we're just going to. So it began at this restaurant that was the first vegetarian restaurant, and the guy, Father Yod, he's getting his name from Kabbalistic alphabet of the Hebrew alphabet, the Yod. So we don't know where he had all this money. Somehow he has all this money, and he was like a martial arts guy, right? So some people speculate that he might have been a hitman, because he had like millions of dollars as a martial artist, and he starts a vegetarian restaurant, and the vegetarian restaurant was frequented by a bunch of Hollywood celebs, right? So like Steve McQueen is showing up there in the 60s. And so this starts bringing people in, and then he starts a commune. So it moves to the commune phase, and then he starts, they're dropping acid so much that he decides that it's time to start doing sex magic. So then it becomes a sex magic cult. Then he becomes a healer. Then he moves his whole commune to Hawaii for a while, and ends up getting the government after him. And then all of the cult leaders swear that he's a healer. And it's always, I've always been weirded out by it. Well, how do they convince people that they heal people? That's something I don't get, because that seems like something that, I mean, you either can or you can't. Like how do you like heal a guy in the cult, right? Unless the cult people are in such delusion that they will just think that they're healed. I mean, I don't think he's actually healing people, but
what was he claiming to heal them of? Like medical issues, or
there was something to do with the one of the great miracles that he's claimed. It's something to do with a pregnancy. I can't remember, but if you watch the Source, the family cult documentary, there's only one. It's a famous documentary. You'll see the section I'm talking about where they're like, he did it. He actually did it. It was something to do with a pregnancy. But then there's another cult that's. Did you watch Holy Hell?
I didn't.
Oh, you
no.
got to watch that one. You'll love that one.
Okay.
So this is
making a note of that one too.
This is another bizarro guy who was a ballet dancer, and he's an extra in Rosemary's Baby, I think.
Oh, okay.
And then he starts. But the weird thing about him is that he's not like a '60s looking, big giant beard, long hair guy. He's like a '80s yuppie who starts a new age cult.
Wow.
So, and then it turns into a mind control thing where he's drugging people's Kool-Aid, literally like a punch drink. And so he would like drug your punch drink and then say, it's time for you to come out in the woods for your session. And nobody knew that their Kool-Aid was drugged. So when they go out into the woods, he's like laying hands on them, and then the LSD kicks in, or the ketamine or Molly or whatever he was giving them kicks in. Then they had this experience. And it turned into a crazy, wild thing. Another cult you might want to look at is Order of the Solar Temple. And that was that's a human sacrifice cult. So that one's crazy.
Oh, wow.
In the 90s, yeah.
I'll definitely check into that. To speak to your question about how do people really feel like these cult leaders are healing people, there is the power of the anecdotal evidence. When somebody meets with someone, a lot of times there can be these complete coincidences. And maybe there was the pregnant woman who miraculously gave birth to a very healthy baby, or I don't know what happened with that, but it was a one-time incident that can't be studied and proven or tested again. But the power of that anecdote is key. And oftentimes anecdotal stories can even almost be more powerful than research because they're emotional. And your mom has a magic potion that she makes when you're sick, and so you tell your friend, I heal every time my mom makes this for me, and or so forth and so on. But I had I had met with a social psychologist on my channel, and we created a video called Does Your BS Detector Work? And he talked a lot about these anecdotal stories and how that can be the thing that keeps people hooked.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. It was probably going from memory. It was probably something like because he had a harem, right? So Father Yod had like a harem of women, and then one of the girls that was his favorite couldn't get pregnant, and he laid hands on her or something, and then she could. But I mean, that could have been that he was giving her birth control and she didn't know, right? It could have been anything like that, and then he stops, right? Because he had control of their diets and everything that they did. So there could have been a lot of manipulation as well in that, for sure.
Right. That's right.
But so this has been a good show. I don't want to keep you too long. Are you okay with answering questions from the audience?
Yeah, let's do it. Definitely.
All right, so guys, as you know, super chats are done through Streamlabs. The Streamlabs link is in the show description, and if you want to ask us a question or leave a comment, again, within reason, if you say crazy stuff, I'm not going to read it. I'll just take your money if you give me the super chat. So BMX 1966, $25, and BMX says, great stuff, Jay, cheers. Well, thank you, BMX, longtime super chatter and follower. Appreciate that very much. That's a big fat super chat. By the way, guys, like and share, turn the notifications on. Appreciate that from our audience. We got a nice, I think we hit, at one point we're getting up towards 500 live, so that's pretty good. Kristen, $5. Kristen says, Rachel Ann is a great guest. I hope that she comes back in the future. Hopefully. She's got a wealth of information. She's got tons of videos over there on all kinds of manipulation. By the way, she has been talking about con people too. Con men, con women. That's another thing that we've talked about a lot. I know I've told you guys in the audience, we're going to be doing some upcoming streams on movies that deal with con men. Con men movies that are actually instructive and enlightening for how real con men work in the world. And also, as you guys know, we're going to be covering in the upcoming weeks the Melville novel Confidence Man, which is actually about con men. It's a really excellent, overlooked Herman Melville novel, and I think you guys are really going to appreciate that when we cover. Because sometimes the literary side of things, like the great writers like Dostoevsky or Melville, they have insights into con men that don't oftentimes come out in the in nonfiction, right? I mean, sometimes writers are really good psychologists, like Dostoevsky, right? I mean, Dostoevsky kind of predicts the modern serial killer, 100 years before serial killers were a thing. So look forward to that, guys. Anonymous, $1. How many raw eggs should I drink a day? I'm guessing that's a joke thing. I do eat raw eggs some days. So depends on what you're wanting to do. Is it okay if I eat it every day and I use a normal egg from the supermarket, or do I need to find safe ones? I buy free range organic eggs, and I live in an area with a lot of farmers, so you can get, like straight up direct from farm eggs. So, but I guess it depends on where you are, but at least get the organic or the free range eggs is what I would say. Bone Man, $5.38, $5. In regard to monarch mind control programs, is it possible that the entire family memories, like the validity of real mother or father versus birth certificate parents, can be implanted in the epigenetics? Giant trust fund banking people. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Bone Man. I appreciate your comment, but I think it would be very implausible that there would be people who have completely manipulated birth certificates. I mean, I suppose there have been cases of a baby switched in the hospitals, but I don't know that there would be implanted false memories for that. But interesting question. Bone Man 5.
I know for
Yeah, go ahead.
Anne Hamilton Byrne, she was able to reassign kids to different biological parents who she called aunties and uncles. And so these kids were raised
Interesting.
with their biological parents in the same home, but the kids were told that it was an aunt or an uncle. So maybe that's what Bowman was talking about, but yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I was confused, but that makes sense. That could be what he's referring to. Bowman says again for $5. If you look up the shape of laminin, what about a crucifix? I don't know what you mean there, Bowman. I'm not trying to be rude to you. It's just you lost me on that one. Nicholas, $2.22. What sort of positive direction would you point? I think Nicholas means what are, I don't know what you mean there, Nicholas. What sort of positive direction would you point a potential cult leader? I can't read today. What is the right thing for a potential cult leader? These are weird. Guys, what's up with y'all's questions today? These are weird questions today. I'm not knocking my audience. I love you guys because you're paying my bills. But I think he means if a potential cult leader is out there, or a guru is watching this, what would you say to a cult leader or a guru is I think what he means.
Yeah, I would encourage the cult leader to examine your intention. Is it to fulfill a void that you have, to fulfill your desire for greatness, or is your intention truly to help other people? Because if you're in the service of helping other people, you really have to remove your ego. People will challenge you. People will call you names. People will get upset with you. You're going to say things that make them mad. And so you got to be really dedicated to learning to deal with that. But truthfully, most cultic leaders will probably never get help because there are such intense narcissism, that I've just seen. And historically speaking, individuals with narcissistic personality disorder never arrive at the front door of therapy because they don't think anything's wrong with them. But that would be my two-part answer.
Well, yeah, because I think to go into therapy would be to suggest that there's something wrong.
Yes.
And that person can't admit that. Yeah. Nicholas again for $2.22 says, what books would Rachel Ann recommend to study how to escape or to avoid cults?
Anything by Stephen Hassan, Hassan. I believe he wrote a book combating cult mind control or combating mind control. I also have two different websites. One is SARS, SARS, and it's Spiritual Abuse Resource Center. They have so many free articles, great, really nice research studies, but they're written in a really nice way. And then the International Cultic Studies Association, ICSA, ICSA. But really the main book, Stephen Hassan, maybe I'm in his cult, but I really enjoy what he has to say about leaving cults. And he left one. So he was able to be a member and then come out on the other side. He's a licensed mental health therapist. So that would be my recommendation. That's a great question.
Typically, do the people who leave cults, they typically have to like completely disassociate, right? I mean, like they might be tempted to think, well, I still need to help my friends there and try to get them out. Or do they need to like just totally get away? Or is it a case-by-case basis?
I think it's a case-by-case basis, but I do think there has to be a period of total separation for the person to get really strong mentally and emotionally, and have that, it's a total process of deprogramming, deconstruction, learning to think in different ways. In the brain that has been traumatized, it starts to be wired differently. And so that takes time when somebody first gets out. I know that could be a whole other rabbit hole. I'll avoid it. But if you are watching and you're thinking that you're in a cult, or you're wondering, is this a high control group? The first thing is take space, ask questions in the group. Does your group get upset with you for asking questions? Do they tell you just be quiet, go along with the program, or, don't question us, we have all the answers? Do they receive it? And then start to build a support system outside of the group, whether you get a part-time job somewhere where you're with people who are non-group members, but start to increase connections outside, which will make it so much easier. If you decide to remove yourself from a group, you need to have support.
Excellent. Good advice there. Orthodox Imperium rising since $25 and says nothing, but that's okay. Thank you so much, Orthodox Imperium. Byzantine Dream, $3. I recently got into a music industry rabbit hole, and Kid Boo, who is a SoundCloud rapper, claims to be a clone, and he backs this up with Instagram Live and testimonials. Have you heard of anything that validates celebrity cloning? I don't believe in celebrity cloning. I think that's kind of a goofy online conspiracy. I've never seen any evidence that that's real, or I mean, personally, I tend to be on a lot of even cloning claims. I'm more of a skeptic. I don't know if cloning is real, or if it's something that's exaggerated, or something that they're wanting to do but haven't done yet. I mean, I just don't have any knowledge of that, but I do not, other than making fun of the celebrity clone conspiracy, don't have any view of that, but I doubt Rachel does either. Do you have a view?
All I say is CGI.
So she says it's all CGI. All right. Let's see. I don't see any more super chats. So again, awesome show. Great overall breakdown of Ann Hamilton Byrne, Mother God, and we got into overview of Teal Swan and what she's saying. So guys, if you want to follow Rachel, her channel is linked in the show description. It is Dine in Psychology. You can go and see all of her excellent videos. She's got tons and tons of videos on not just cult leaders, but you've covered the Josh Duggar,
Yes.
You've covered IFB, Independent Fundamentalist Baptist groups. Who else have you? I was looking through. You got a pretty vast catalog of videos there. Who else have you covered that we don't know about?
I did a little commentary on the Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation, just because it was a great opportunity to talk about DV, IPV, like you said, the Duggars, Institute in Basic Life Principles, what happens in religious cults. I have like a really high interest in the religious cult aspect, and just some various Netflix documentaries, Tinder Swindler, the vegan show, it's escaping me right now, but with Sharma.
Oh, I'd never heard of that, but I watched your video the other day. So,
okay.
Yeah, the woman that Alec Baldwin had a crush on, and then
yes.
Yeah. And then and
Yeah.
that guy that she met on Twitter, the chunky dude who was like, "I'll make you immortal." It's like,
Yeah, exactly. And her dog immortal.
Yeah.
Yes. That was a great con man mhm, situation. But yeah, range of different things.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me
Absolutely.
on. And to your audience, thank you.
Yep. One last question. Do you have any what's upcoming cult leaders, gurus, con men that you're going to cover?
So the next video that's coming out is a collection of about 10, 12 cult commonalities between every cult that I have studied thus far. I have my list actually right here. I'd like to do some things on FDLS. I want to talk about the troubled teen industry in a specific school called Elon School, United Pentecostal Church. There's a family called the Murdaugh family. They were based in South Carolina. The dad, has been accused of murdering a couple people. Interesting family dynamic I want to talk about. And there is an up and coming, I haven't decided if I'm going to cover him, but he's an up and coming, pretty patriarchal religious leader who I think is very problematic. He owns a big publishing house, and so he may be coming up as well. But yeah, that's kind of and Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm going to make a part 2 because I did cover and make a part 1.
Yeah, one of my best friends, his dad was a high up in the Jehovah's Witnesses back in the 80s, and he left. It was actually a national news story. He ended up on Oprah because because of the I don't know if you know about their thing with blood and the blood transfusion stuff.
Oh yeah.
So this became a big news or legal case because the Jehovah's Witnesses said that if you give your daughter blood transfusion, you're excommunicated. But the judge, I think in Texas, ordered that he had to do it or it would be murder. So this turned into a big scenario, big brouhaha, because the Jehovah's Witnesses sent a helicopter to try to get him to steal the baby and fly away. And and he ended up not doing it, and he left the Jehovah's Witnesses back in the 80s. He's in a bunch of documentaries, but yeah, that's one of my best friend's dad. I got a crazy story about all that.
Wow. Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, well, everybody, thank you so much to Rachel. Be sure and follow her and her work and her channel. And great show tonight. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Right. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, have a good night.
Take care.
Bye.
You too. Bye.